This is Life Journey with Dawn Simmons, and I want to talk to you about faith. Specifically, I want to talk to you about the most difficult times in my life. And without my faith in the Lord and His Word to me, I don't know how well I would have been able to endure this last month. I am certainly not claiming that I endured it with complete grace. I did my best, but this was certainly a month that challenged my strength and my focus in my faith walk. Before I explain what happened, I want to take you back to about 4 months ago when I filmed a video entitled 3 Examples of Strength in the Lord. And I filmed it actually right in this very spot. And I want you to take a minute to listen to that. It's actually 19 minutes and 29 seconds. And I'm going to put a description in the link so you can see that. But the reason why I'm referring to that is because in that video, one of the things I talked about when I talked about Peter was his faith walk. And I talked about that moment when he was in the storm and he needed to get out of the boat. And when the Lord called to him, Peter actually got out of the boat, and I was commending him for that, something that we often overlook. And I asked, if I were in that situation, what would I do if that circumstance, that situation was what I encountered in this last month? And that's what I want to share with you. Because when I was in the storm, and I wasn't sure as I entered into it what that outcome would be, but that was the moment that I knew that the Lord was calling on me and my faith walk. And I needed to make a decision. Was I going to stand on what the Lord spoke to me? Or was I going to go with what I saw, what was in the natural, what was before me? So I had to have the faith required to walk on water for the miracle I needed, because an alternative outcome, it could not be part of my thought process. So to give you some background information, I have 4 children. I have 3 sons, 26, 23, and 22, and my daughter is 20. And on April 2nd or 3rd, we aren't quite sure on the date, my oldest son had a major stroke. Now there's going to be moments here where you're going to have to bear with me, because this is still very raw. But that stroke was not recognized immediately, not even in the emergency room. And in those situations, many of you probably are aware that minutes are critical. Blood flow to the brain is critical. And so Sunday afternoon, I believe that's the April 3rd, I received a call from my daughter-in-law asking me to come to the emergency room because she was having difficulty with the doctor listening to her. And I think it was he just didn't respect her. And so once I got there, truly I walked in with the power of God. I wasn't entirely sure what I was walking into, but I knew that I wasn't walking alone. And it was because of that, not me, but because of that, that once I got there, the doctor began to actually order the diagnostic tests that were necessary in order to diagnose the stroke. And once that was done, then he was immediately sent to the stroke center that's in our region. So the damage to his carotids, 2 of them, was pretty substantial. So the right one was closed about 50%, and the left one was completely blocked. When he got to the stroke center, surgery was scheduled pretty immediately the next day. And this was all happening really quickly for us. You know, my son was you know, he was married. His wife and I were trying to really make sure that we could process what the neurosurgeon was explaining to us. And at the heart of it was a healthy 26-year-old man with no history of stroke on either side of the family. So it was, how did this happen? Why did this happen? But then most importantly out of this was what was going to happen. So there were a lot of emotions during this phase, but I made sure that as we were going through this, that I was speaking to the Lord. And I was hearing what He had to say about this. Because as you're trying to process this situation, it's very emotional, but you can't lose control of your emotions in this. You need to have a steady mind, because you have to make decisions and plan out, you know, what is this going to look like? What could happen, and what choices do we have? At that time that the stroke happened, my son's life was in an amazing place. His career was booming. They were building a house. There was a lot of things that they had happening. He is also a YouTuber. And so he had a lot of things happening that were really, it was just amazing. That's all I can say. For a 26-year-old man, he had really accomplished a lot of things in his life. And so for this to happen was really devastating, because everything seemed to be going in such a wonderful place for him. And I'm talking to the Lord, and in this, the Lord tells me that my son is going to survive. And He tells me that at the end of this, he's going to be even better. But I'm still dealing with the details of what's happening and the motions of this. But I took those words and I placed them in my heart, and I put all my faith in what the Lord was telling me. And I was moving forward, and I was sharing this with his wife so that she understood we needed to be in a place of strength in our faith as to what was going to happen. Even though it was difficult to believe if you were from the outside looking in, I knew that my God is faithful and true. And so if the Lord said, your son's going to survive and he's going to come out even better, then it had to be true. There was just no other way. So surgery took place the next morning. It was successful. Everything seemed to be going fine. It looked like everything going forward is going to be uneventful, and we were obviously rejoicing. That night, we left the hospital at 7:22. Now, visiting hours ended at 6. This particular hospital, we are in California, so we are still dealing with COVID restrictions. And visiting hours ended at 6. You could only have 2 people in the ICU, which was fine, actually. COVID or no COVID, that's fine. You don't want a whole lot of people in there anyway. But, you know, they allowed us to stay late, and we wanted to stay until the shift change at 7. And the reason for that was because we wanted to make sure that the person watching over my son, her husband, for the next 12 hours, that they knew him, that we knew who that was going to be with him. That was important to us, because he wasn't handling the pain well. There was a lot of, he was complaining all day of severe pain in the back of his head after that first surgery. And they were medicating it. They were trying to fix it. And because of all those medications, it was actually masking what was really going on. So this new nurse that came in and was doing the evening shift, she actually picked up on something. And I think she didn't want to alarm us, but she picked up on something. And so the CT scan that he was going to do in the morning, they actually moved it up to immediately. And so as we were leaving, we were leaving somewhat casually, feeling like, okay, we know this person who's going to be watching over him. We feel comfortable with that. And we were also reluctant to leave, because obviously we don't want to leave him. He's just had a surgery. We don't, you know, the 2 of us, we tag teamed. We never left him alone, so that if one of us needed to go eat or whatever, someone was always with him. And as we left, the nurse let us know, hey, I did move this scan up. So he's going to be leaving in a few minutes to go get the new CT scan. And so we knew that they would call us and let us know if something was going on. So we drove home. We only live about 15 minutes from the hospital, and we actually only live about a mile and a half apart. And I had just sat down into the recliner. I was texting people. And letting people know surgery went well, everything is looking good, positive outlook, we're in a good place. Literally just finished all those texts. My phone rang. I remember sitting there and I just put my phone down, and that's when my daughter-in-law calls and answered the phone, and I heard hysteria in the words, and I will never forget the words. Dawn, we have to go back to the hospital because he's going into emergency surgery and they don't know if he's going to make it. And at that point, I knew what the Lord had told me. That immediately came to my mind. And I knew my daughter-in-law knew that. But in the face of a phone call like this, it really challenges your faith. It really challenges what you believe in. And so as my husband and I rushed back to the hospital, and she was being rushed back, with her mom, I was calling people. I knew at that point I needed prayer warriors. I called my pastor. I called friends. And I think I even looked at my recent call lists and I started calling people there. And everybody got pretty much the same call, which was just really a quick snippet of, this is what happened. This is what I need from you. Got it. Goodbye. Click. Move on to the next person. And as soon as I'd run through the list that I could quickly make sure I went through in my mind, I started praying. And I started praying for the same thing I was asking of these people, because I knew what the Lord said. And I didn't know if what was happening was part of the plan that the Lord had, or if the enemy was interfering with this plan. And if that was the case, I needed to use the words that the Lord gave me, and I need my prayer warriors to be speaking life over my son's life, the truth that the Lord gave us. I wanted the enemy to hear these words of life, because if that had anything to do with it, then that was the final say, the Lord's words, not what the doctor said on the phone, but what the Lord had to say. And that was a power that we had, because the blood of Jesus is the final say. Whatever he says, that is what I was speaking over my son's life. And that prayer that I did on the way to the hospital was arguably one of the most powerful prayers I have ever done, I have ever even heard, and will probably be the most powerful prayer I will ever speak in my life. And it was so fervent and so really gut-wrenching, to be perfectly honest, that my throat actually, it hurt. My throat was raw, because it was just coming from such a place in my heart of demanding that I was probably kind of screaming in a faith-filled way of what it was that I was speaking over my son. So once we arrived at the hospital, a security guard escorted us up into the ICU. And even though we knew why we were going there, we were also taken kind of a back routes way into ICU. And so we were there before the way that we knew that you would come the front way, before we knew it. And because we were still processing the phone call, we weren't ready for what we saw when we turned that corner. And I don't really want to go into a lot of detail on that because that is still very difficult to process, and it's not really important per se, but understand we were not prepared for that. Now, our other family members were sent to the ICU waiting room. They were escorted there. But miraculously, my youngest son, who was a recipient of one of the phone calls, managed to get there rather quickly. And he was escorted up to ICU also. And remember, there were only 2 people allowed, and it's the same security guard. So when he was brought up there, it was literally seconds after my son's wife, my daughter-in-law, and I turned the corner and saw my son in a different way than we had left him. And so emotions have the opportunity to overtake you, and my daughter-in-law was just not ready for that. And so thankfully, with my son showing up, as soon as she saw him, she kind of melted into him, and so he could support her, because that gave me the opportunity to walk to my son and pray over him from head to toe. And I was quoting everything that the Lord spoke to me. And as he was laying there, because they were waiting for the neurosurgeon to arrive and to get prepared and get in the emergency room prepared, so I only had a matter of minutes, and I certainly didn't want to stand in the way, but I think everyone there didn't think he was going to survive, so they were, in a way, giving us our last minutes with him. But that was not how it was going to be. And I never want to be in that situation again. And I never want you to be in that situation. And at that moment, that's when I knew that that was my getting out of the boat moment. That was my moment when, was I gonna believe and have faith in the word that the Lord gave me? When I was staring at my son laying there and looking at him in the natural, looked like the complete opposite situation. Was I going to get out of that boat and stand on faith in what the Lord said? And really, I had to make that decision, but there really was no question. I was going to walk on water. I was going to walk on water regardless of what I was seeing in that moment, looking at my son. And I was going to act in faith. And I was not going to give fear and disbelief an opportunity or a place in my heart. I was going to get out of that boat. So when I talk about the prior video and I asked the question, what would I do if? That was it. Now, the ICU doctor was very caring, and he believed in God, because he kept, as he was trying to explain to us what was going on, and we saw him for a number of days after that, he was with a heavy heart, because I really don't think that he believed that it was going to happen. And he would always be cautious about saying whether or not he would survive, and he would end it with, God willing. And every time he said that, I would respond with, He is willing. And at one point it would kind of irk me, like, why does he keep saying that? Because I keep telling him he is willing. But really, when I look back at it, because it happened so many times, I can't even count the times that we went through that little cycle. I actually appreciate that happened, because every time he said that, God willing, God willing, it gave me so many additional opportunities to say, He is willing, and speak the truth about what the Lord gave me and what the Lord had to say about the situation. And that's the final word. So there's a lot more to this story than I'm able to share right now. This is still pretty raw for us, but it was a long journey that we went through. But my God is faithful and true. And I can tell you that if you have anything in your life that is difficult for you right now and you just don't know if you can make it, reach out to the Lord. Let Him help you. Let Him guide you. Let Him build you. I say this in every video, but it has a new meaning to me now. If you want to bring more life into your life, open up your Bible, because the Lord's waiting for you.